I am very pleased to introduce Dr. Chet Sunde. Am I pronouncing that right, Sunde?
Sunde, yeah.
Okay. He's a licensed clinical psychologist in Redding, California, and he specializes in PTSD, treatment for combat veterans and first responders, which is a fascinating area, I'm sure. He developed Platonomy, or Platonomy, a therapeutic approach based on Plato's constitutional psychology that identifies a four-part model of the psyche. And his main interest is in developing practical frameworks for applying Platonic psychology in contemporary settings. He has a book that has come out in um, 2025 on Platonomy, Ancient Wisdom for the Modern Self, which was published on May 29th and is available through Amazon. And so can all look forward to that.
Thank you, Vonna. Thank you, Lou, and everybody for sticking this out to the end. Um, yes, so I presented once before. I was there when we used to be live in New York back in 2015. Presented kind of my early model, and had an article in 2016 called Plato's Superego. And essentially, for those that aren't familiar, I made a case for Plato's Republic being primarily, almost entirely a psychology book, in my opinion. Certainly, there's a lot of um, politics in there that's valid, but I think his whole purpose is for a healthy psyche leading to eudaimonia. And the fourth part, so we have the appetites, the spirit, the reason, but the fourth part, which he calls different things throughout the book, but specifically the autopoliteia, the self constitution. Um, and Vonna, if you would give me a like 2 minute warning when you want me to do a hard stop. I went through my slideshow at lunch and it's too long, so I'm only going to make it about three-quarters of the way through. But I do have, for anybody interested, and Lou, I can email this to you. I have everything, um, all the text from my slideshow printed out, so anybody that's interested in reviewing that, I can make that available. And then the article, I think, going to be coming out soon.
The article is forthcoming, Chet. It's going to be published
Awesome.
in the July edition of
Oh,
our
wonderful.
journal.
So this is based on that article, and the article is based on my book, which just came out. So if you're interested, you can find out more. So uh, Plato's Republic. So I'm sure everybody knows that it originally was called the Politeia in the Greek, which I think the Constitution is the best interpretation of that. Every polis had a politeia, written or not written, establishing what kind of government it is or was. Um, I think that a lot of the misunderstanding, from my point of view, of the Republic over the years comes first from Aristotle. Um, his writings of the Republic kind of reflect this view that it's kind of a bad idea as a utopia. And Aristotle obviously was a very smart guy, so I don't think he would be that confused about what Plato's meaning was. But he also was starting his own school, so I think there might have been some alternative bias there. The other reason I think is that we call it the Republic for the most part because of Cicero. When he wrote his own Republic, or De Res Publica, modeled after Plato's Politeia, that became the word we use throughout history for the most part, is republic. And a republic, starting then and to now, it means a specific type of government and really means a state. And I think that's added to the confusion. Another issue is the title questions. There's two questions. One is I think we need to call it, at least in our own minds, the Politeia, to understand it's a constitution and it's an internal constitution. And the ancients addressed this problem. I don't know if any of you have seen, sometimes the Republic also has a subtitle on justice. Sometimes it's on the just person, but usually if it's used at all, it's on justice. But the word for justice is daikazune, and the word used in the subtitle is peridikeio, and I'm not good at the Greek, which really means specifically a just person. So I think somebody back in early first century recognized that this is specifically a psychology book. It's about how to become a just person yourself, as opposed to a government, external government. Next slide here. So a mic drop. So you guys may be aware of the term mic drop for somebody who gives a speech, or a rock and roll star who kicks butt in his song, and then they drop the mic, like that's the end of the story. Like this is all that needs to be said has been said. I think there's several what I call mic drops throughout the Republic, where something's said that really encapsulates the whole thing. The first one being in the very beginning, the first few pages, when Socrates is talking to Cephalus, and he asks, how is your journey to old age? Is it rough and difficult? Is it a rough and difficult road, or is it smooth and easy to travel? Cephalus's response is that if men are temperate and cheerful, even old age is only moderately burdensome. If the reverse, old age, Socrates, and youth are hard for such dispositions. So I consider that a mic drop, because he's saying that it doesn't matter where you're born. He talks about a few different issues. Talks about money. Talks about being born in Athens or in a small city, old age, young age. Says that your level of eudaimonia, or happiness in life, comes from how you respond to those things. So it's really more about character than it is about your circumstance. And since I did my presentation 10 years ago, I found a couple of other spots where this 4 parts of the psyche can be seen. And it starts right there with Cephalus, because he doesn't tell us, like a lot of things about Plato's dialogues. We're hearing a conversation, so that nobody really lays out their theory per se. But when Cephalus talks about a healthy character, he talks about being eukoloi, kosmioi, and eukoloi. So that's temperate and cheerful. A little bit later, when Plato or Socrates asks him about money, he says, Cephalus, a lot of people say that your life is good because you have a lot of money. Cephalus's response is, well, they're not completely wrong, but not as right as they might think they are. Because money is only good for a reasonable man or person. So we have easily satisfied, well-ordered, reasonable. And then towards the end of his part in the book, he talks about getting near old age. A lot of his friends have fear of what's coming next, and fear that they have lived a life that's going to result in some kind of consequence. But if you've lived a life of justice and piety, you can go on to face whatever's next with hope. And so that's the 4th characteristic he describes there, is justice. And piety, in my opinion, is just justice in relationship to the gods, if they exist. So right here in that little bit with Cephalus, it lays out, in my opinion, the entire purpose of the book. And the rest of the book is really just getting into the details and trying to figure out, well, okay, so how do you develop a just or healthy character? Mic drop number 2, constitution over fortune. So I already kind of mentioned this, but I think our society, most people would think that happiness comes from having money. We see it with people who become successful musicians or actors or sports personalities, or win the lottery. All too often, that fortune and fame does not bring a happier, good life. Again, because it comes down to your character. Mic drop number 3. So at the end of book 1, I had missed this for years. I just kind of read right through it. But Plato ends where he talks about the functions of anything. A function of a knife is to cut, so its virtue is to be sharp. The function of a psyche, this is the first time I believe psyche is even mentioned in the book, it has four functions. Zoe, our life, keeping us alive. Bolus the, deliberation or reasoning. Epimeleia, which is care of ourself, has to do with our emotional part, and arcane, rule. And the virtue of the psyche is justice. So again, by the end of the book, this holds true. He doesn't talk about the functions of the psyche again, but these functions clearly lead to the four parts of the psyche. And justice is what, most of the book is trying to figure out what justice is internally. Socrates says here at the end of the book that I really don't know anything, because despite what we've all just agreed upon, they all agree on this little thing about function. We still don't know what justice is. So on the discussion in book 2 about different theories of what justice would be. And then we have some metaphors that I think are important. Road versus race. When Socrates asks Cephalus, is old age, it's a road we're all going to have to travel, hopefully, because the alternative is to not be here. And, he wants to know, is it easy and smooth, or is it rough and hard going? When you look at the geography of Greece and compare that to what developed in Rome, they say all roads lead to Rome because the Romans built roads between everywhere, nice, excellent roads, which many of them are still in existence. It was common in Greece where these city-states are really separated, and they didn't have roads for the most part between them, and it's a rough terrain. It would be a common question to ask, hey, you've been to Sparta? How's the road? Is it jagged and rough, or is it easy and smooth? So, that Socrates uses that about the road of life, and that there's some pairs of words that I think are helpful in understanding this. Tropos and hodos. Tropos is the word that Cephalus uses for character, and hodos is the path or road. And so, our life is up to it's up to our character versus the path. So, well, it's enough said on that. The other pair is tuke and suke, saying the same thing. So tuke is fortune or chance, where we're born, what happens, whether there's disease or what have you. But suke is what determines your character and how you respond to those things. So life in the fast lane. People might be aware of the Eagles song, Life in the Fast Lane, and surely make you lose your mind. And I think that's the idea here, that when we live an unjust life, and that can be a lot of different things, but one thing that is talked about in the book is somebody who's willing to lie and cheat and do whatever they can to get ahead. That's life in the on trachea way, or the rough road, because while it might pay off in the beginning, it usually will not pay off in the long run. The right lane, Eudaimonia way, is living a just life, and regardless of what obstacles are on the road, you make the most of them. So it's not guaranteeing a constant state of eudaimonia, but it really guarantees the best chance at eudaimonia, the best level of eudaimonia you can have, depending on your circumstance. Another thing that's mentioned in the book about roads is the foot race. Again, he talks about people who are willing to live unjustly often win the first part of the foot race from the scratch, which is the line where you take off, and maybe they cheat and jump ahead. But by the turn, when they're coming back, they've burned themselves out. And it's like the tortoise taking things slow and smart ends up winning the race. Mic drop number 4, justice as a constitutional relationship. So by book 4, in book 4, Plato's talking about the different types of constitution and comparing the relationship, or no, we're not talking about different types of constitution yet. Sorry. He's talking about the different parts of society and what it would mean for a just society to exist. And then he looks at internalizing that and the different parts of our psyche and how they can either work against each other or work together. And so by the end of book 4, he has established that there's 3 parts of the psyche, but also a 4th part having to do with the relationship between what kind of rules that they live by. And he gets ready to start talking about the unhealthy or unjust forms of government, gets interrupted, and they go off in the next few books to get into, some of the highest points, some people think, of the philosophy in the book, which is talking about the divided line, the sun analogy, the cave. And in those books, we still see the tetradic or 4-part soul throughout. So on this little chart here, this first part, the cola level and objects of knowledge, this is the divided line. I use cola for conjecture, opinion, logic, and abstraction, or icasia, pistis, dianoia, and noesis. So those are the different levels of knowledge. These are the objects that they deal with. In the 7th letter, which I think is valid, though there's controversy about that, but Plato talks about the 4 objects, or I'm sorry, instruments of knowledge, dealing with images, dealing with the name of something, its definition, and the knowledge of it itself. I believe that these 4 parts of the divided line, the instruments, line up with the 4 parts of the psyche. Our appetitive part deals just with initial, our sensory information, and we kind of have a guess, conjecture of what's coming in. And, that the appetites is the part that deals with pleasure and pain, but really deals with survival. And if in doubt, it's better to err on the side of danger and get the heck out of there. So that sensory information, initially goes through kind of the lower part of our brain so that we can react quick if it seems to be danger. If not, then we can go to what our spirited part has to say, which is what we care about, what we think something is, what we believe in. But philosophers should also engage their reasoning, logic, mathematical measurement, that kind of thing, to get to kind of integration of all the knowledge, which equates to, in my opinion, the relationship between the parts, the relationship that's taking in the information of all the parts. In modern neurology, it's our executive reasoning. Now, the end of book 9. So, book 8 goes into, that's where the different constitutions in the states as well as in the psyche are talked about. And again, I think the main point is how we live our life. And I used to think that book 9 should have been the end of the Republic because, again, he summarizes at the end that it's the autopoliteia that we should refer to. There's a question: do you think this government that you've described exists anywhere on Earth? And Socrates says, maybe not, but there'll be a paradigm, an image of it in heaven that the philosopher will always refer to, and that will be his or her city. And philosopher kings have been talked about, philosopher queens have been talked about. Plato makes the point that the philosophical ability of a human isn't determined by their gender. Some other things are affected by your gender, but not that. And the point is that anybody can become a philosophical king or queen of themselves, and that's really the whole point. Modern neuroscience. So, I'm a psychologist, so I've studied various forms of psychotherapy over the years. And for years, I've used kind of integration between psychotherapy and Platonic philosophy as I've developed this. But also neuroscience seems to line up with these theories. So here we have the Platonic faculty, the four parts of the psyche, their modern cognitive functions. So again, the autopoliteia, the constitutional governance, is our executive function. The DSM is what psychotherapists use to make diagnoses and try to help guide treatment, but mostly it's just to be able to bill insurance. But it talks about the different functions that our brain has. And if you look at them and you look at the parts of the brain, we have our prefrontal cortex that deals with the executive part that takes in all the information. And if it's not cut off, it's making decisions that are based on all the information. Our neocortex is our logical part. We need attention, being able to, should have memory on there, short-term memory, long-term memory. Our limbic system deals with our emotions, our spirited part. Socrates talks mostly about anger, but I believe all the emotions are included there. When he talks about grief, he uses an example of, is it possible to not grieve if you lose your child, I think is the example. And he says, of course it's not possible, but we should mediate the grief. Metriopathy as opposed to apathy, which Stoics teach apathy, and there's controversy about, do they mean that there's no good emotions, or is it only certain emotions that are good? But one of the most frequently written about is anger being bad, and I disagree with that. There's four basic emotions that we have. It's universal, it doesn't depend on culture or anything else. It's physiology, and they all have to do with what we care about. What we care about will determine if we're happy in response to information related to that, or sad, or angry to promote justice, or guilt if we've done an injustice to someone or something we care about. It's very healthy to feel guilt because it motivates you to want to make amends and to fix it. So this ancient framework anticipated modern discoveries, not inventing something new, but recovering something profound in Plato's psychology. So from theory to practice, how do I work with patients with this information? I don't talk a lot about Plato, but I talk about, in order to take care of yourself, you have to know yourself. And that's certainly Platonic, and it goes back to the Oracle at Delphi. Know thyself. How can you possibly take care of something if you don't know it? And I think this issue can shed some light, from my perspective, on some of the earlier conversations, such as search for meaning and what changes when we find meaning. Well, I think that there's no way to have meaning if you're disconnected from what's important to you, which is your emotional part, and working together with your intellect to solve problems, to go after goals. One of the biggest problems most people have, whether you need philosophical counseling or not, or psychotherapy or not, is that there's way too much anxiety in the world. Anxiety is the fight or flight response, and rarely are we in danger. But if we have rules, or that come from culture, from parents, or anywhere else, that say that emotions are not okay, when an emotion gets triggered, often anxiety is right there on top of it, in between your awareness and your feeling it. It suppresses that. And so it disconnects us from one of our most important parts. And the way to know that is to develop a autopoliteia down here, the fundamental rules that teaches us to attend and pay attention and care for ourselves. So when I describe this to patients, I talk about know yourself, the self made up of four parts: your soma or survival system. Again, that's your appetites, your basic needs to stay alive. And the one trick that that part of our brain, of our psyche has is when there seems to be something wrong, it's the fight or flight response. We either need to flee from a danger or fight it.
You are 2 minutes away from completion.
What's that?
You're 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And so I'm going to see how far I can get here. So I teach them the different parts of themselves, how those function ideally, and then that's the next part. So relationship with self. So this relationship with self is part of the rule. So self-rule is the model I teach them. And what's self-rule in Greek? Nomia or autonomy. So Platonic autonomy is Platonomy. So self-rule, know yourself in order to take care of yourself. So the rule matches up those four parts, and it's saying what's healthy for each of those parts. They each have their own needs. They each are valid, but you need to be aware and attending to take care of those or act on each one of those. So relationship with self, any relationship we're in is either healthy and attentive and caring, or it's unhealthy, which can be neglect, not paying attention, or worse than that is abuse. I'm paying attention, but I'm using harmful words or other things. And this term I skipped over, eusychia, something I started using recently. Talk about eudaimonia. We talked about it earlier. Good, daimon, hard to figure out, right? Is it a spirit outside of us? Is it our spirit? Our psyche, that word psyche also has to do with spirit or that thing that is not our physical aspect. But I think eudaimonia comes from eusychia, which is when our psyche is integrated and taking care of itself. I'm going to skip. So Maslow used the term eusychia. I thought I invented it. That was his hubris. Of course, it's been used before, but our definitions are a bit different. I go on to, so I think I skipped at the beginning the Leibniz quote, which is if somebody could systematize Plato, they do a great service to humanity. Well, that's what I've decided to try to do, is actually make Platonomy into something that can be applied to life, like Stoicism is being applied. You see lots of books about people, how you incorporate Stoicism into your life and so forth. So the biggest part of that is the self-rule and understanding yourself and taking care of yourself. But there's other exercises and so forth that I go into in the article and the book on how to day to day stay on track with those things. One is differentiating anxiety from emotion because they have different physiologies. Mic drop number 6, actually, the race metaphor got in here twice. I apologize for that. So the Republic from beginning to end, starting with Cephalus, into the middle and different parts of the psyche, and even to the myth of which I used to think book 10 was a waste of time. But throughout the myth of these principles are there. And the whole idea that you use philosophy to make good choices in your next life, well, maybe. I don't know if Plato really believed that or not, but it certainly applies to how you live your life today and tomorrow. You can choose what kind of life based on self-knowledge. So that's that. So that
I think you're out of
had
time.
it. Okay. My last statement on it then is that I'm working on some new discoveries, but for me, understanding the statesman and the laws, the other political books of Plato, I don't think those can be fully understood until you understand this aspect of the Republic. And once this is clear, those make a lot of sense. I've been taught that the Republic and the laws. The laws is like, oh, the Republic doesn't work, so we got to settle for some laws as second best. But really, the statesman is the person who helps people develop uh, their healthy psyche, and the laws are laws that the government uses to support that. And it really is an integrated system.
Thank you very much, Chet, for a very clear and very interesting discussion.
Thank you.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. So let me see if I can turn this off and see who has a hand up.
Seraphim has a hand up. Let me spotlight Seraphim.
Hi, Chet. That was a great
Thank you.
presentation. I'm really interested in getting more involved in that because I just love Platonic studies. I'm just really kind of intrigued by Leibniz's statement, though. I mean, Plato was systematized. It's called Middle and Neoplatonism. So what's up with that? Why do you think you would make such a statement? It's kind of curious, considering the fact that Middle and Neoplatonism is like the fundamental philosophical movement of late antiquity.
Well, it is, but I think it diverges quite a bit from what we have in Plato's dialogues, at least for sure in the Republic itself. Um, Others could probably speak. It was mentioned earlier about Neoplatonism. I think it's very different from this core essence of how to live a healthy eudaimonic life.
Okay, so I guess what you're getting at, and probably what Leibniz was getting at, was a system based purely on Plato rather than additional kind of accretions or whatever, right?
I think so.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Hey, somebody else? Well, I have some questions. And I'm sure there'll be further questions later. Actually, are you planning to do more work with Plato, or are you going to move to another philosopher? Excuse me, I have asthma, and the practical applications, because I can see so much that can be used in counseling here. It's really very interesting.
Well, thank you. My interest has always been I've been studying the Republic for 20
Okay.
years. And that's it's always spoken to me that there was something more there, and I've always been interested in psychology, and that's, my degrees are all in that. So always drawn to that. But as I've, from my point of view, understood the Republic more, I've just gotten excited about, for the first time, about really delving into the statesman and the laws, because I thought that was something very separate, but to me, it looks like it's very related.
I want,
And and I'm sorry, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which I studied and used to be a practitioner of, and Stoicism and cynicism and the ones that live out in the woods that look at pleasure, but through real moderation. I'm blanking at the moment. To me, I see Plato kind of
Epicureans.
thank you, Epicureans. To me, I see value in those, and they've developed their own things, but still, it seems to go back, like Mills said, to footnotes to Plato in a lot of ways.
I also wanted to ask you whether you see this self-governance from the Platonic perspective being equally helpful to psychiatric patients with very serious problems like major bipolar or schizophrenia.
To the extent that they have reasoning and an ability, whether it's through medication or otherwise, to manage themselves to some extent. And often it takes some medication. So somebody with bipolar, true bipolar, medication is almost always necessary. If that stabilizes them enough, then they're just like a person without bipolar, in the sense that they still have these parts, and they can utilize the psychotherapy aspect. Or psychotherapy, philosophy. To me, it's all the same thing. And mental illness is all a matter of degree. except for when you get into schizophrenia and bipolar, there's, different category, but still there's a person in there. There's a psyche in there.
Mhm. I agree.
Vonna, we have two more hands up, Karen and Amber. So should we ask Amber? She hasn't spoken yet, and then Karen, okay?
Amber?
Hi, sorry. There I am. Okay. Hi, thanks
Right.
for this, Chester. Sorry, I'm sort of like in between doing laundry and doing all
I
these
like
other
it.
things at the same time, so I apologize. But I'm wondering if, so first of all, I'm just curious, if you've ever read Joe Walton's series on Plato's Republic? It's
I don't
it's
think
sort of a
so.
fantasy sci-fi. It's called The Just City. The first book is called The Just City.
Oh, no, sounds interesting.
It's fantastic. It really is. But one of my concerns always with the Republic and the idea of like, this Platonic notion of like the charioteer and reasons driving the emotions and the passions and desires and so on, like we want to have reason as like the utmost kind of uh control mechanism,
Mhm.
as it were. Um, and similar to the way that like neo-Stoicism has been adopted in a lot of coaching circles, which I find very troublesome. And it's
Mhm.
very much this kind of like Silicon Valley emotion bad, reason good,
Yes, let's all be
dichotomy.
Spock.
And yeah, and so like I worry about something similar happening with the use of Plato and some of these therapeutic coaching, counseling
Mhm.
kinds of contexts, or like attempts to rehabilitate Plato in a certain sense. I really like the idea of like Socratic midwifery. I like the idea of like Socrates as the gadfly who's kind of, picking at things. But the Republic is much more of like the sort of, Plato's systematic, it's less Socrates, more Plato, it seems to me. And I'm wondering if some of those more troubling aspects of Platonic thought and the Republic are also a concern in the ways that you're trying to adapt this.
Yeah, well, and I think those result from not understanding the fourth part because, the three parts, yes, the chariot, where's the fourth part, right? It's just controlling your appetites and your emotion from a logical standpoint. But that can be taken way too far. And in the Republic, by the end of book 9, it's talking about integrating, and each of the parts have their needs, healthy needs, um, and need to be fed, so to speak. And it's a relationship between it's your relationship with yourself. And again, it's about care. It's about he says a few times, becoming a friend to yourself. So it's not that extreme version of CBT or Stoicism or just suck it up, don't be weak. It's absolutely not that in my mind. And that's what's been missing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Karen?
Yeah, Karen, thanks. Thank you, Amber. Karen?
Yeah, I have a question about the new use of the word eusychia versus eudaimonia. And I'm not a Plato expert, but I can't help. I don't know if this is true for the average person that's, had philosophy 101 or read something, but the one thing that I remember from the Republic is the cave and the sun.
Mhm.
And as important as self-knowledge and self-help and self-care and all those self things are, the image of the cave was turn around and get out and, if it were possible, to look directly at the sun. So I'm wondering if you could say a little about that.
Yeah,
There
but
seems to be a higher. It's not just self, although self is important, and there's all these parts of the self and so on, as you're saying. But
mhm.
what about that higher element?
Well, the sun represents the good itself, right? And is that God or is that something else? Don't know. Can't really look
Yes,
at it. Although there is
yes,
a definition of the good later in the Republic, where it just means that which is sustaining and takes care of versus that which distorts or disrupts. So he gives a very simple definition of the good later, but not when he's talking about the sun. And I think that fits. And in the cave analogy, you know, the philosopher, the one who finally realizes the higher truths, and is just using their logic and the noesis, turns around and goes back to life and to help the others. And, you know, maybe it's an analogy of Socrates. He came back, nobody understood him, and they put him to death. But I think it fits the divided line very well. But there's that return, but the return is not as a philosopher king to start a utopia. It is within yourself. It's to turn back to your life and live the fullest life you can live as a friend to yourself, integrating all the parts. Is my take.
Helping others turn around and be free, and
for sure,
ultimately,
right?
Yeah.
How many patients have people seeing that once they get better, and that comes from the heart. That's a desire to help others. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
Well, I think this is a good place to stop because we have another speaker who has very little time. Pepe, are you there? Yes, I see you.
Thank you, Chet. Vonna will go on now in a sec. Let's reorganize the screen. Give me a minute, please.
Okay.